Well, good morning, Travels with Dottie here, and we have yet another exciting adventure out of the Eagle Nest Visitor Center and Museum. And today we're going to go to the Eagle Nest Dam, the source of really everything that Eagle Nest Village is today is tied to the dam that was constructed over 100 years ago. And we're going to start with a lecture as usual by Jack Schweitzer. And then after that, we're going to caravan over to the dam, which is, let me tell you what's really unique about that, is you can't get to the dam. It is fenced off, it's locked, you can't get in there, but the museum has special access through the state, and we're going to be meeting the dam master there, who you'll meet, and we're going to go to the dam, more history on site, and the beautiful view of the dam. And I can't wait for you to see this video. I'm excited about it. You RVers, this is more about understanding the community that you're spending time in. And the more you understand about the communities that you spend time in, I'm telling you, the more fun you're going to have.
You can see there's a list of people: the Interstate Stream Commission, New Mexico Game and Fish, New Mexico State Parks, Office of the State Water Engineer, the Water Master. All of them, we have to get permission to go out to the dam. So, but we in order to do that, we have to conduct an educational tour, although what you're about to hear from me is hardly going to be educational, but you'll have to tough your way through it. That's what we tell them it's going to be anyhow. So the dam master is a guy named Greg Carlisle, and Greg's not here yet, so we might not even get into the dam because the gate's locked. He probably on a bender or something, you know how they, you know how those dam people are. I call him the dam master. So, but he's a teetotaler, I think. So, I lied. Anyhow, so historians, weathermen, and fishermen all have in common that they're liars. But I digress. We're going to talk a little bit about water today, starting pre-Columbian times and bring it up to the need for the dam. If you're looking to, Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. And truer words were never spoken than what's going on in the American West now. If you're looking to read some books, these are pretty good ones. I can tell you The Cadillac Desert, written by a guy named Mark Reisner, is really very good. So over the years, there have been all kinds of harebrained schemes to get waters to a very dry climate, one of which was to, well, let's just pump the water out of the Great Lakes and bring it here. And it seemed like a good idea because there's a hell of a lot, 1/5 of all the fresh water in the world's in the Great Lakes. And it seemed like a good idea, except it's 4,000 feet lower than we are, and the amount of energy it would take wouldn't be feasible. So, that being said, we are here in Eagle Nest. We're in a pretty wet oasis, if you've noticed coming in. It's not always this way on the plains here, but generally speaking, we do pretty well. We get about 16 to 18 inches of annual precip. Most of that's this time of year, by the way. The monsoon season builds. We've never had a dam tour canceled because of thunderstorms, but about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, these are, storm factories over here, and the clouds will start to build, and they're going to hit somewhere. If you were in the valley last night, we had a hell of a light show to the west and to the east of us, virtually for hours. So what brings us here is water, and if anybody in here has used PowerPoint before, it ties into spell check. So you get a whole lot of these things like that. So, and I'm dyslexic, I can read them all. So, in doing research, I found some old pictures. There are some creative, there are 3 or 4 different ways to spell eagle, starting with E-A-G-E-L and E-G-E-L-E. But they finally got it right. But the purpose of that is that where it says eagle spelled correctly is called the Roost, Eagle Roost Rock. And that will be one of the reference points when we get down there. And to the right of it, that little dip is where the emergency spillway is now. So And I am a scintillating speaker. Last time I was with UNM, this was 5 minutes into the talk. Inject a little humor. I call this family portrait. I don't know which one I am. My grandfather used to tell me, you ever notice there's more horses' asses than there are horses? So, and I've found that to be true in my 80-some years here. So Eagle Nest Dam was, we're going to do this here, by the way, because down there, if it's windy, I don't have that broad voice, and megaphone would kind of disturb the nesting fowl up on the cliffs up there. So anybody know what ruidoso means? It means noisy water, so we're going to have a lot of that down there as well. So, history of the Southwest simply is cool, clear water. And back in the 30s, there was a song like that, I'm told. So, the guns that won the West, Colt 45, Winchester 73. I know a salty rancher down the valley here. He said, they may have tamed it, but they sure as hell didn't win it. He said that's what won the West. So whether it's snow melt or life-giving rain, or whether from windmills or wells or dams, and whether we call them acequias in our native tongue or ditches, the water which they carry across millions of acres is the lifeblood of the American West. That's for sure. So what brings us all here today is this precious of commodities and that little concrete plug that sits over there in the Cimarron Canyon. But it's more than a plug. It's located at the confluence of Moreno Creek and Cienega Creek and 6 Mile and American Creek. It's a critical element for much of life here in northern New Mexico. And it's certainly more than just statistics. It's a statement of our culture here. It's drinking water for our communities, irrigation for our farms and ranches. It's the water of life for about 4,000 trout in the Cimarron down here. And 4,000 trout sounds like a lot, right? And the only people who lie more than fly fishermen are fisheries biologists, because I've been down there and gotten skunked before. Anyhow, water grows our food, it washes our dishes, showers off the dust of a day on the trail, makes our coffee, boils our eggs, and it baptizes our kids. But make no mistake, the politics of the West is the politics of water. And as I said earlier, Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. Well, how then did this massive concrete come to be here in this remote corner of New Mexico? Therein lies the story, and when you've gone from here today, we hope it will have been told. It is the C.S. Ranch, S is for Springer, Frank and Charles, who built Eagle Nest Dam, but we must go back several hundred years for context. New Mexico has been called the high dry, the big empty, the high lonesome, the land of room enough, the land of time enough. And the need to both store and to deliver water goes back to pre-Columbian times here in the West. The Chaco, the Fremont, the Anasazi cultures that were over in the Four Corners all used dams and water diversions, ditches and acequias to channel water to their fields. It's believed that the drought caused the decline of those cultures and forced an exodus into the Rio Grande Valley, where those cultures have become more well known as Pueblo cultures that we see today in this area, in Taos and Pecaries, and to a lesser extent, the hybrid plains culture that exists to the east of us that developed in Cienega, today's Pilar. If you know where Pilar is at, that was an old Hickory Apache farming community, by the way. So now it's an artist community. So, and they had peach orchards and they irrigated crops down there as well. Now, as you go further down the Rio Grande Valley, the irrigation systems became a lot larger and more corporate, let's say. But a lot of these are still in use. This is one over on the Chama. Anybody familiar with Canyon Road in Santa Fe? Well, the next road to the south is Acequia Madre, and that's the ditch that existed prior to the Spanish being here. So Acequia and adobe, by the way, are Arabic words from North Africa. Remember, the Moors conquered Spain, so a lot of that came over with them. So, and there's some still in use. So the more or less sedentary agrarian cultures of the Pueblo cultures, water was important, but it was certainly important out on the plains as well. We could live about 3 days, I think, without water, so they always had to have a water source. So these things existed prior to the Spanish coming here. But in 1540, some guy named Coronado entered what is now New Mexico. And on September 7th, 1540, exactly 17 air miles from where we're sitting right now, a captain from that Coronado expedition named Alvarado was in Taos Pueblo. So between 1540 and 1598, there were a number of different expeditions that the Spanish put in here, but there was never any permanent settlement. There was one attempt at settlement up near Raton in the Trinidad area. A bunch of Franciscans thought they were going to convert the Kiowa, Apache, and some of the tribes up there. So, and they were never seen again, by the way. Which brings you to the name of the river up there. It's called, today we call it the Purgatory River. But at one point, early on, it was referred to as the picket wire. And so that is a corruption of the French trappers were in this area. And in French, purgatory is purgatoire, and that became picket wire. But the most beautiful name for that river is the Spanish name, which is Rio de las Animas Perdidas en Purgatorio, the river of the lost souls of purgatory, referring to the Franciscans. But I digress, as I often do. 1598, we get a permanent settlement in what is now the Española area. They dubbed it, the Spanish dubbed it San Juan Pueblo, but it's actually Okeawinge, and Okeawinge has reclaimed its name from the Spanish San Juan. So the Spanish were no strangers to irrigation in their arid homeland, and they adapted really well here to the high dry. First, they used the acequia madres of the Pueblo Indians, and they, as I mentioned earlier, they settled first in Okeawinge, the area, and then they moved to Santa Fe shortly thereafter because of more favorable circumstances up there. But that irrigation was already set up there. So the Spanish expanded, unlike the French and unlike the English. The Spanish didn't encourage a lot of settlement for people to come over. So, the reality here is that the Spaniards never really claimed the area through a lot of settlement like the English did, or like the French did up in Quebec. But just by reference, 1598 here, the first settlement in Jamestown was 1607, 9 years later, and the first French-speaking settlement was 1608 in Quebec City. So the Spanish were here. In fact, we were still huddled on the east coast of the United States when the Declaration of Independence was signed, 250 years ago, roughly. And two padres, Franciscan priests named Dominguez and Escalante, left Santa Fe in 1776 to walk to Monterey, California. They never made it. They got as far as Salt Lake City, but gives you an idea. And we viewed from back then out here as no man's land and unpopulated, but the Spanish had been here for quite a while, a couple hundred years actually. So from 1598 to 1821, the Spanish have a very loose grip on what this area is here. But they did set the precedents and actually started more irrigation schemes than had been previously. So 1598 to 1821, there's very little change in the Spanish adaptation or settlement here in this state. But in 1821, several things happened, but we'll digress back a few years. A couple of fellows named Lewis and Clark and another guy named Zebulon Pike. Lewis and Clark in the Louisiana Purchase, Zebulon Pike in this area. In fact, he was arrested by the Spanish in 1807. It's about 40 miles north of where we're at right now. And he was arrested because they called him a spy. So what did the Spanish do? They took him and his men and they had an all-expense paid reconnaissance of the Spanish Southwest, because they took them all the way down to Chihuahua, where they spent about a year and a half in jail. But they took notes and maps and put them in the barrels of the guns. They removed the flints and the powder from them, but they let them keep their firearms. And so Pike and his men were making maps and notes and stuffing them down the barrels of the guns. So when he got back, he had a perfectly guided tour of the Spanish, and they did exactly what they didn't want them to do. So anyhow, but it opens it up to trapping. John Coulter was coming back down to Missouri with Meriwether Lewis, and he doesn't even go home. He turns around and goes right back and does that 2 years running. And the famous Coulter run where the Blackfeet tried to kill him. But that's a story for another time. So the trappers are out here, and they've expanded a lot of what is now into the Southwest. In order to trap here, you could not be an American, you had to be a Mexican citizen. So there were what we call galvanized Mexicans. Kit Carson, Lucian Maxwell, a whole series of trappers became Mexican citizens. They married Mexican women, a lot of them as well. And some of them even settled down in Taos, and there was a loose confederation of them called the Taos Trappers. So that's what it was all about. The rage was beaver fur hats, beaver hats. But by 1840, the silk hat was in play, and the mountain men were at loose ends. I did mention there's Kit Carson and the Taos Trappers. A lot of these guys, it was a much more staid society back in the States. It was a lot looser society here in a lot of ways, and so they liked it here. So 1821, the first group from Missouri comes across the Santa Fe Trail, the first group not to be arrested. And they weren't arrested because the Mexicans won independence in 1821. And so the goods that they could get from the United States were about 2/3 less expensive than the lock that the Spanish had on goods coming up from Chihuahua. So they were welcomed with open arms. But be careful what you wish for. Because remember, we had these galvanized Mexicans here, and their allegiances were not with Mexico. Their allegiances were with the United States. So that nexus of events. Here's a picture I found. If you've been to the plaza in Santa Fe, this is the La Fonda Hotel in an earlier iteration, by the way. Pretty neat. The end of the trail, the official end of the Santa Fe Trail. Where we are right now is a Mexican land grant of 1.7 million acres. And by 1841, the Mexican government's like, oh, there's way too many Americans coming in here. We've got to buffer that influence. So they created these land grants, 1.7 million acres. This was called the Beaubien Miranda land grant, by the way. And it fractured and came back together again just in today's world. Ted Turner's got 558,000 acres over the hill from here, called the Vermejo Park Ranch. The UU Bar Ranch is about 250,000 acres. The Boy Scouts own in fee simple or lease about 200,000 acres. But the CS Ranch owns about 130,000 acres. And the CS Ranch is the tie-in to the dam. But we'll get there in a minute. So, 1841, but the first ranches don't start until about 1844. And they start just south of Cimarron, down where a little town of Rayado is. Down there. And then just prior to that, they started on the Poneal Creek, was just almost in the city limits of Cimarron. The problem with that down there was that we were grizzly central. We had grizzly bears. We had a lot of grizzly bears in the area. And so they planted crops down there. This is Kit Carson and a couple of his trapping buddies, because by this time, trapping had gone to hell, and they were looking for employment. And all they did was sat down there and watched the grizzlies kill their cattle and eat their crops. And they built big platforms, by the way, because a dog grizzly can't climb. And so they sat up there on the platforms and watched the grizzlies take it out. So they thought, man, this may be not a good idea. So they retreated up to Bent's Fort in Colorado. And that is where Carson met John C. Fremont, who was known as the Pathfinder. But he really was a path follower because the Native Americans had it. Anyhow. So there we go. That's one of the things. So Ben's Fort. The principal manifest destiny. James K. Polk decided to pick a fight with Mexico in a land grab. We had bought Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon to satisfy some of his war debts. We acquired part of Mexico in 1818 in a treaty called the Adams-Onis Treaty, Texas independence in 1836. And so the handwriting was on the wall because Texas had a lot of Americans there, and that was happening here as well. And Polk says, I'm going to be a one-term president, so he picks a fight. When Texas comes in to the Union, he sends troops down to the lower Rio Grande and provokes a Mexican battle to do what he wanted to get done. So we start a war. Mexico, by the way, was taken without firing a single shot. It appears that the then Governor Manuel Armijo liked his money and his life better than getting shot at, so he skedaddled down the El Camino Real down to Chihuahua. And we took New Mexico without firing a shot. Here's an early pick, actually not a pick, but a drawing. And notice that there are 2 American flags in there. And for those of you who are familiar with Santa Fe, the flag on the mesa to the right is where Fort Marcy is. And that's where we set up down there to command that town. So anyhow, so we have abortive ranches, and by 1865, the Civil War is over. And as with most wars, when they end, the young men tend to scatter and do the things that have become more valuable when they're faced with seeing people die. And so 1849 to 1865, we start to establish the permanent ranchos. And that really gets expanded in 1865, right after the Civil War. It's really when the West starts to fill up, if you will. It's when the buffalo are starting to be killed. It's when most of the conflicts with the Indians are coming to an end. So the initial ranches were, it was Indian depredations. We had primitive conditions, weather extremes. So that didn't work. But eventually there was enough impetus that those ranches started to take place. So in Rayado, which is just south of Cimarron, Lucian Maxwell's house is there, and so is Kit Carson's. They've been restored by the Boy Scouts. So if you have an opportunity to get down there, I would encourage it. Particularly the Carson house. It's a living history museum. It's very often worth the time. So, and we have, the language of ranching is Spanish. We have riados, ramadas, lariats, all that sort of stuff. So, and we have the land barons. So this land, the land use patterns here, very little of New Mexico was subject to the Homestead Act, by the way. So we have always retained these large lands, all ranches. People call them Spanish land grants, but almost none of them were. Most of them were Mexican land grants, by the way. So here's a few of the Americans. Lucian Maxwell's house on the left there, that's the one in Cimarron that exists no more. That stone mill there was the Indian Agency. Was built for the Ute, Moach Ute, and the Hickory Apache. And the first Indian agent was that guy on the right, Christopher Kit Carson. And then the guy with the stogie in his mouth is Lucian Maxwell, who was also a trapper, but he married well. So he ends up with this 1.7 million acres, by the way. I have 11 acres of it, so. As I said, the language of the cowboy and the land grants, the Santa Fe Trail. So rodeo, all those things. If you've heard the expression buckaroo, it's really just a corruption of the Spanish word vaquero, and we anglicized it, like we did picket wire. So there's this massive, come on in. This is the keeper of the key. This is Greg Carlisle. He's the dam master. Welcome, brother, and thanks for coming up. So we have this nexus of events that occurs right after the Civil War. Custer is augured in up on that dusty slope up on the Little Bighorn. The Indians, as a result, are driven onto reservations by and large. The last really Indian fights occurred in skirmishes scattered here and there in the American Southwest, the Apaches. So the buffalo are hunted to near extinction. Most of the Indians are banished to reservations, and so that threat is gone, and ranching takes hold in a very big way. And anybody in here a rancher? Nope. Anybody in here eat beef? Well, got a few of us that do. So. This wasn't chicken ranching, by the way. Well, chicken ranching is a whole other euphemism for something else up in Las Vegas. Somebody got that obscure reference. I appreciate it. So you got all these cattle, you got all this land, you've got land barons, you got a lot of people with money, and how you got to get the cattle through the winter is you have to grow hay. In order to grow hay, you can grow more of it if you have water. So if you have water, buffalo's gone, Indians are banished, cattle, you got to grow hay, and that brings us to the dam story. So this location of this dam, where we're going to be going here in about 45 minutes, was first recognized probably in late 1870s. There were still occasional Indian depredations in the area, but not much by then. And nobody ever did anything with it. But Charles Springer and his brother Frank being the dominant player we're going to talk about. The 1.7 million acres that we have here was owned by after Lucian Maxwell sold it, was owned by a Dutch consortium. And there were people squatting on it. And so in the attempts to get the squatters off, there was something called the Colfax County War, and a lot of people were shot. Reverend Tolby was shot in the back of the head about 1.25 miles from where we're at right now after he was preaching up in Elizabethtown. Must have been a bad sermon, that's all I got to say. But anyhow, he went on to his greater reward. But in order to, and there were title claims against this 1.7 million acres. The Springers were born in Philadelphia, they were raised in Iowa, and they were here. And they were lawyers. Geez, Philadelphia lawyer. So, in any event, they represented the Lollipop Guild, the Dutch, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and part of their compensation package was 130,000 acres. That's how the Springers came to get the 130,000 acres. And they also had all that land down there, and they thought, well, if we can get water down there, we can sell some of that land. And so that was when they bought the dam site, and when the process started to be thinking about putting that dam in. It's a very unique dam. This gentleman over here, and I use that term loosely, by the way. So he can answer lots of questions that I'm not going to be able to, but we'll be available after the presentation here and then down there as well. So Frank Springer is the guy who drives this, and there he is. If you've ever been to the New Mexico Museum of Art, that is a direct result of this guy's drive as well. So the CS Ranch was founded in 1873 by Frank and his brother, and like I said, it's 130,000 acres. It became one of the more historic brands, and it's still a ranch today. One of the grand old ladies of ranching, Linda Davis, has passed, but it's still in the family. So getting water down to this land on the plains, which they hoped to sell, was the purpose of the dam. And there is the dam site before the dam. And that is actually, if you look, there's a little wagon trace going in there. That's the way we're going to be going in today. You'll recall from my earlier thing, that's Eagle Roost Rock, and there's the dam itself. And you see all that white leaching, that's just minerals leaching out of the concrete. That started when it was completed, and it still goes on to this day. And in order to let water out of the dam. I'm getting ahead of myself, but we'll do it anyhow. He's got to walk all the way up through that rocks to the right, up on top, all the way over to the left side to let water out. We're not letting, what are you letting out this morning? Anything?
Not much.
Okay. So we have a de facto minimum flow, which keeps the trout alive in the river here. So from the dam down to Clear Creek, there's not much additional water that comes in. Tolby has a little bit. So because we've had so much rain, as you guys commented on earlier, to the east of us, there's been little call for water. And in addition to that, the amount of agriculture out there has kind of steadily decreased over the last 50 years, right, Greg? Yep. So, permit secured in 1907 for the dam. And this is a privately funded dam, by the way. Plans are approved. And here's a plan view of the dam. Looks faintly like that one up there on the Colorado River, Hoover Dam, doesn't it? If you've been up there. It's said that this was part of the study for what happened up there. That's a lot bigger, obviously. This is a profile. They had to blast down to get into solid bedrock before they start the construction of the dam. So in 1916 it starts. Remember, this is World War I. Almost all of the labor comes from Taos Pueblo to build this. And the guy who was on the site was a guy named Neil Hansen. And he's kind of a who's who in the area there the gentleman is now. And his descendants still have a ranch and land out here. So he was an immigrant to Denmark, and he was the on-site engineer who oversaw all the construction of it. And he actually, when he was done with this, he went over and built a dam similar to this for the King of Spain. So there's Eagle Roost Rock before the dam was in. Now keep in mind, we're pretty remote today, but not like it was back then. The nearest railroad came into Ute Park. And that railroad was called the St. Louis, Rocky Mountain and Pacific. And the and Pacific never happened. But it got as far as Ute Park. So they were able to bring some supplies in on that train. And then they had to buy wagon and horseback and mule, and they had to bring it up to start the construction on the dam. The dam was constructed on time and on budget. And it was finished in 1918. Interesting about the railroad, the St. Louis, Rocky Mountain and Pacific, was also known as the Swastika Line. And I did a little bit of study on that. The swastika, in its various configurations, developed at 4 different places in the world without any cultural connection. The Navajo call it the rolling log symbol. So it's you'll see it on a lot of Navajo stuff. And if you get to Raton, the multi-storied building over there, which is, I think, the International Bank now, was called the Swastika Hotel. And if you look at the top, at the brick friezework in the architectural top of that building, there are swastikas in it. Interesting. And another tidbit, Oklahomans in here? Anybody Oklahoma? Okay. Well, the 45th Infantry Division in the 1930s had a swastika as their emblem. And of course, with what happened in Germany, they got rid of that and it became the Thunderbird Division. Anyhow, interesting. I think. Nobody's snoring yet, so I guess I'm doing okay. You're thinking about it, I know it. So these cranes and ramps and all this stuff, they had to be built from available resources. They had timber, obviously, here. And so these things had to have counterweights in order to lift the concrete into place. I will mention there is not one piece of reinforcing concrete or reinforcing steel on that dam. And I'll show you what when we get down there today, and we do this in the morning because the sun's on, it's a good photo opportunity for you. There, you'll see some iron eye bolts coming out. That's just where they anchored a few things. That's the only steel that's in it. So, and here it is under construction. Eagle. Now, remember the and Pacific part of the Rocky Mountain, St. Louis and Pacific. Well, but at the time this was constructed, they still wanted to go to L.A. And so, after the construction of the dam, not before, which is what we had thought, but after the construction of the dam, Greg found that they blasted the tunnel in that we're going to see today after the dam was constructed, which seems to be a little risky to me, but the dam still stands. And we will be able to, the tunnel was still there today, was never used, obviously, and you'll be able to see obliquely where the outfall and the dynamite rock came out of it. So this looks like a cold scene here. So no reinforcing concrete, or no reinforcing steel in the concrete. 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, 1 cubic yard, 27 cubic feet. That's a 1 cubic yard cement mixer. That's what they mix the cement in to pour there. There's 22 to 23,000 pours in that dam. Which, if you remember, we looked at the plan earlier. The dam was supposed to be 140 feet high. When we get down there today, it's 124 feet high. And you got to believe somebody was on some whiskey and just said, hell, that looks good enough. We're just going to leave it right there, you know? So that mixer's still owned by the Hansen family, by the way. And in 2018, for the centennial of the dam, we had it up here and on display. Just some more of the construction photos of it. It's crane's almost ready to go there. The ramps that the men and they had to get the materials up. It was quite quite an undertaking for where we were at back then, for sure. So the access for men and materials, the ramps were probably pretty dangerous. As I said, almost all the workforce came from Taos Pueblo. And there you go. It is 9 feet at the top, right?
10 feet is the outside dimension. The deck is 8 foot wide.
Yeah. And the base of it is
44
feet thick. So, but in order to start the construction, they had to divert the Cimarron River. And we'll see some of that in a minute. There's no reinforcing steel in it, but they were able to take what they called plums, which were rocks. They would clean them, steam clean them, and then they could put them into the concrete to displace, so they didn't have to use as much concrete. And the engineer over here tells me that's where a lot of the strength of the dam comes from. So, not being an engineer myself. So, there, if you look at the top of the dam itself, you can see some of those rocks have been placed. Those are the plums. And it's nearing completion there. There's Eagle Roost Rock on the left. And there is a little bit closer view of the plums themselves. More scaffolding. So, there we go. So, the thing gets completed. They create this diversion tunnel so they can route the water around so they can start the construction. And how they control letting water in and out is that they put a mechanism in that tunnel that ran up through the dam. And that is the mechanism. And it's still manual like it was back in the day. And made by the Coffin Valve Company. Boy, oh boy, from Boston, Massachusetts. They're going to go pack the car and get a frap down there. So there is the tunnel, which we're going to get a chance to see today. There won't be a whole lot of water coming out of it, though, will there? So, but the hole where it comes out is probably 20 feet deep. So we don't want to have any inadvertent swimming lessons down there, so we're going to be careful. But it's a little bit rocky, and you can see that's the tunnel itself. And there is the completed project. That's the road we're going to be coming in on, by the way. And like I said, it's the, oh hell, it looks high enough at 124 feet. And this is an early shot here in the 20s. I'm quite sure what that car is, but I know it's an early one. Prior to my time, but not much. And the object of all of this was to create irrigation downstream. The emergency spillway has gone over the spillway twice, once in the early 50s and another time in 1994. And Greg tells me you could have walked across and not gotten your knees wet. So here's a winter scene. But the unintended consequences of that dam are the lake and the tourists. So it wasn't very long, in 1919, a year after the dam was completed, a guy from Oklahoma named Talmadge Dirk Neal came up here and bought some land where the village park is today, and he put in a mercantile store and some cabins. And that started the movement from Elizabethtown, the old ghost town, mining town up here, down to Eagle Nest. And in a very short time period, there were cabins and camps and everything you can imagine being built here and around the lake to capitalize on that fishery. It was a good fishery from the very, very beginning. And as that says there, dudes winter better than cattle, so there was money to be made. So in 2002, I think it was, the CS Ranch wanted to sell it, and the state turned it down, the lake. And when they turned it down, this guy named Ted Turner was expressing interest over here, and that was all it took for the state to decide they wanted to buy it. So, and they did. And they paid $2 or $3 million more than they could have bought it for a year earlier before Ted got involved. So we'll talk about their abilities to negotiate. So we're going to carpool down there. It's limited parking. The road goes back and there's a big U-turn. So when we get down there, whoever's directly behind me, I'm going to have you come all the way around, and that gives us plenty of time. I think we're going to have plenty of space anyhow. So, but the lake has just been a great resource for us. It is about average pool, would you say now? Yeah, the potential was 78,000 acre feet of water, but it silts in, and there's only been really full a couple times. So this is more or less an average pool. It's full of trout, by the way. I'm full of something, but not trout. And the big white birds you see out on the lake are white pelicans. They're the second longest wingspan of any bird in North America, behind the California condor. They're about 9 feet, roughly. Just a couple other side notes. We winter 6,000 to 8,000 elk in this valley. And I'm a fly fisherman and a known liar, but even if you divide by 2, that's a hell of a lot of elk. We winter more elk than they do on the National Elk Refuge up in Jackson, Wyoming, where I used to live. Most of that's because of the wolves up there. We're kind of a little hidden gem, as I said earlier, Colorado without the crowds. Do you have any questions of us?
What about the eagles?
Well, we got a few eagles around. We have, in one of my previous incarnations, I was a wildlife manager, and I was involved with Cornell doing peregrine hacking back in the 70s. That tells you how old I am. That's 1970s, by the way. And then we started an eagle hacking program in the state of Pennsylvania. In 1980, we'd fly up to the Churchill River in Saskatchewan, want to take eaglets out, because if you get them at a certain point and you take them somewhere, they become imprinted to that area. In 1980, in the state of Pennsylvania, there were 2 bald eagle nests, and they produced 1 eaglet. A lot of that was due to the chlorinated hydrocarbons, or DDT, in the egg accumulation. For a period of 5 years, we did what it's called taking those animals, or birds in this case, and putting them back in the wild. The process is called hacking. Hacking is different now, so after 5 years, they quit that program. Last year in Pennsylvania, there were 326 eagle nests that all produced eagles, either one or two eagles, so it was pretty successful. Here, we have an eagle nest on the east side of the lake. That's one that's acknowledged, by the way. I find that over there elk hunting, it was a nice October day. I decided to take a nap. I got up and trying to find my cousin, and I walked over, and it looked like it was some kind of macabre slaughter scene. There were prairie dog skulls everywhere. And I looked up, and there was that nest. So it's still there. It produced eaglets this year, by the way. Hopefully they'll both live. But we do have a significant resident population of birds of prey here. It's even made more significant by the fact that we have lots of prairie dogs. So spring and fall is a very significant migration through here. There was two years ago in the spring, there was a cow elk carcass down on the south end of the lake. And as God is my witness, there were 13 adult bald eagles on that one. And they don't get the white head and tail till the 4th or 5th year, by the way. So, and we have golden eagles. We just had a tour of the lodge out here the other day. There were, I couldn't tell because they were far enough away, but there were probably 2 immature bald eagles down on the lake. And we have all sorts of other things. We have peregrine falcons that come through here. They're lesser, but then we have prairie falcons. We have a little guy called a merlin. And then all the other usual suspects, the harriers and the red-tailed hawks and those types of things. So, sorry for the long-winded answer. Any other questions? Well, I'll tell you what, I want to thank you for your time, and we'll use the restrooms here. And when everybody's had that opportunity, we will saddle up and head to the object of our affection, the dam. Okay, thank you.
I've been eyeing the closed and locked gate to this road for 2 years, and today, for the first time, I get to go down it to the dam. I've always wondered what it looked like down here, and here we are. I'm riding shotgun with Jack today, and I just wanted to show you this beautiful little short drive into the dam area. And these cabins here are for rent. And Jack said, I believe it was Taos Fly Shop handles the renting of those. They're in Taos, and you may, if you're interested, give them a call. And if you rent those things, apparently there's a way you can get in and out on the gate if you're renting there. And we're getting real close to the dam. I'm pretty excited. And here we've arrived.
This rock face over here is the rock face where the dam goes through. And if you walk up, you'll be able to see, as we walk up towards the dam, you can see the outfall. You can almost see the opening right here. It's kind of oblique. There's a little bridge here. If you walk out there, you can get a really nice photo shot up towards the dam. Just take the shot and then come back and trade off. Come on down. And you can see there's not much water being left out now.
Did you say the railroad tunnel was around here somewhere?
Yeah, it's in that rock face right here.
Okay.
These trees are blocking it, but as we go up, you'll be able to see. We're going to be looking at it obliquely, but you'll see the outfall. It looks like a talus slope.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is crazy. They did that after this was built, right?
Boy, huh? That takes ser huevo grande.
Guts, huh?
If you look right up between this conifer here and this tree, that's the opening up there to the tunnel. It's kind of oblique and hard to see, but as we walk up, you'll see where the rock that they dynamited in there came out and it spills down this slope here. So, well, we can walk up that way. Oh, everybody's a critic. You'll see we'll see a lot of this. This is willow. Latin name is salix, and from this they make salicylic acid,
Aspirin.
which is aspirin. And the Native Americans would grab this and they would chew the bark for pain relief.
On this project.
I've been here my whole life. I grew up with the people that built the dam. Their
Really?
family. The engineer's family and the owner's family.
Wow.
We all went to school together. So I had a little bit different connection to it than other people did.
Do you happen to have like a favorite dam story?
Not really. No, I want to hear about the one where I fell down coming down the other day. I'm not allowed to climb up there till next month sometime.
So this dam's a little personal then.
Yeah, and when I took it on, and then they had a lot of stuff written up in my laptop they gave me, and it's like, who wrote this stuff? This is true, you know. So I did a complete history on the dam.
Is it published somewhere? Or?
No, I guess the state engineer has it in the archives or something. But I went and looked, I researched the engineers, everything. Because Miss Trujillo, which that was Neil Hansen's daughter, she says, well, my dad, he left from here, but this was before she was born. He left from here and went to Spain and built a dam, but I don't know where. So I saw her a while later out, and after I was doing my research, I said, you want to know where?
Oh.
I found a YouTube on it.
Oh.
I researched the engineering firm to find out what they were doing in 1920, a project in Spain, and got that on it.
The only other dam I know about in New Mexico is the El Vado.
That's got a problem right
Got
now.
a severe problem, and it's
not
as old as this dam. Is it?
No,
That railroad line. Is it where those?
see where
those
this?
rocks
See
are
all
coming
that
down?
shot rock?
Yeah.
I call it shot rock, talus.
So kind of as that tapers up, that's where you would see
That's
it.
the top of it, and it actually is on a curve.
Oh. Wow.
But
Really, they got the.
it's a little treacherous to get to.
But not. They didn't get the bedding done for the
No,
future spots.
that was part of a contractual agreement, and they went ahead and built the dam, and the railroad never progressed.
Yeah.
In fact, it sort of World War II, they cut up one of the engines for scrap iron.
Yeah.
I found the other engine. It's been restored. It's in someplace in California.
These plants along here are wild plum, but they don't last very long, trust me. The bears are on it like right away. There's the steps that Greg's got to walk up to walk around. So, and then I'm going to go to the left here. We're going to go see where the outfall is. There's not much water coming out. You got to watch your step over here. And it's like we're walking through bamboo, so. Stick, there's a sharp drop off at that stick, but that's the outfall, and you can walk down here or there, take some pictures if you like. Boy, and I never have, so I haven't taken advantage of it, I should say. But you're welcome to walk down there, sure. Just watch yourself.
Two hanging out in there.
Oh,
Water smells pretty good.
a little bit higher water. I'm on that bridge. You can see wakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's 40 feet thick.
44 feet thick
and
at the
8
bottom.
feet at the top.
And it,
10
yeah, it's
feet
8.
at the
It's
top,
8
just-
feet for the last 20 feet.
Yeah.
You can see where it goes out. This was a Bartlett and Ranney Engineering from San Antonio, and they were like the premier dam builders at that time. They went around and built dams everywhere.
And on time, on budget, Jack said, so that means the government didn't do it.
No, this was out of somebody's pocket. Nothing no fancy stuff, nothing extra. But there was lots of these dams being built at the time. They were private consortiums that put together for irrigation projects. Actually, the one in Spain was built by a Canadian company for an irrigation project in Spain.
Wow.
But the King of Spain wanted to shake Mr. Hansen's hand, but Hansen, they told him you have to wear gloves to shake his hand. He goes, I don't care to shake his hand.
Now, what is that deal hanging out up here?
Right there,
Yeah, that's
that was a little hoist they had at
Okay.
one time when they were trying to do put this patch.
Everything that's going on in town is going to be on there. We're an eclectic group, 315 people, by the way, and 5 idiots. But it depends on what group you're in, who the idiots are. So, my next door neighbor, I live behind the museum. My next door neighbor is a retired Alaska game grizzly biologist. Her husband fishes the Aleutians for salmon. He's up there now. This is his last year. My neighbor on the other side is considered to be the best pairs ballet dancer of the 20th century. His name is Jack Schweitzer. So it's an eclectic group. And Greg and I are on work release from the New Mexico State Penitentiary. We were able to get the bracelets off though, so. And
Mexico, you just tell them I'll come back.
so Texas here, everybody from Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico? All right.
Colorado.
Colorado. There we go.
Is there any continuing maintenance that has to occur on the dam, or it's just it functions as it is?
There is, but there's no funding, so.
Yeah.
So who controls the dam now? The state?
The dam technically belongs to the Department of Game and Fish, but they're not allowed to operate it. So it's operated by the Interstate Stream Commission, which is who I work for, which is part of the Office of State Engineer. The water, the state owns all the water, but they don't have the right to any of it. It's all been adjudicated.
It's kind of like our own.
So it's not complicated at all.
So they pay 20.
You know, that's something I do not know.
So when the state bought it, it's like they bought the sleeves for the vest. So, but this state park, Cimarron Canyon State Park, are contiguous to each other, and this is a 40,000 acre Carlisle Neblet Wildlife Management Area, by the way. And Carson National Forest is 1.5 million acres. From where we are now to the Texas state line, it is 150 miles, and we have the most intact shortgrass plains left on the continent. Starts basically south of US 50 in Colorado, runs through parts of southeastern part of Colorado, northeastern New Mexico, east central New Mexico, ends down about the Permian Basin. We have the largest elk herd on the plains in North America. Nothing even comes close, but the closest would be Charlie Russell Wildlife Management Area out in the Badlands on the Missouri in central Montana. It's a pretty spectacular place. We have, if you know where Los Alamos is, there is a fault line that runs northeast out of there, out across the plains. The terminus of it is in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which happens to be Black Mesa, which is the highest point in that state. But all along it's volcanic activity. We have prairie outlier mountains around 10,000, 8 to 10,000, some a little closer to 11 out there. And then the Canadian River Canyon is at its deepest, probably not more than 600 feet deep, but it's a nice riparian area that provides a place for the elk to move up and down that corridor. Plus you have...
You got a spider on you, Jack, on your collar. He doesn't want much, but...
Okay, Charlotte, enough. But so, yeah, you have that, and then you have Capitoline National Monument out there. Taos, I think I mentioned this morning, is the third highest concentration of art galleries in North America, behind New York and LA, the Santa Fe to Taos corridor. If you're not familiar with the Taos Society of Artists, you probably ought to Google it. It's pretty interesting. Even from its early days, starting around 1893, it's been a magnet for artists from really all over the world.
I don't know if you know that, Jack, but when we were doing the tour on Saturday morning, there was a 3.7 earthquake by Raton.
I did not know that.
So I looked. It came up on my phone because I'm supposed to inspect the dam.
Supposed to.
I was here.
Well,
I didn't feel it.
We've got a hell of a lot of thumbs here today, so we'll be probably in good shape.
There was an earthquake? Oh, okay.
So the Rio Grande Gorge, by the way, is not an eroded gorge. It's two tectonic plates that are separating. And my understanding is, I'm not a geologist, it's one of 4 rift valleys of its type on Earth. It's also the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, which is about 300,000 acres plus or minus. In 1968, the Rio Grande Gorge and the Rio Grande in this state were the first river designated wild and scenic by the feds. And of course, we have all these cultural aspects with the Pueblo culture as well. Taos Pueblo is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, by the way. If you haven't been there, I'd encourage you to go. And that's about all I have. Any questions you have about this?
Probably later today.
Yeah. Well, we got a phone call. We got a phone on the website, so. All right, folks. Well, I thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll mosey on back down. I'm going to drive and herd you down that way in this white thing here.
Don't drive fast. Or do you want to get out of the way first?
Thanks.
Well, that concludes today's video and dam tour. I hope you enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And there's lots more content like that on my channel. Check it out and have fun. And I will see you all on the next one. I appreciate especially those of you that make it this far in the video. You are my hero. Thank you.